UFC 298 betting and DraftKings show. We have 12 fights this weekend, $200,000 up for grabs on DraftKings. I'm Jon Kelly. Let's hear the picks. Kicking things off in the women's flyweight division, we have Miranda Maverick, a minus 180 favorite with the comeback on Andrea Lee at plus 150. And this is one right off the bat that I have some serious interest in the underdog in KGB Lee for a couple reasons. We'll start on the Maverick side. For starters, she's coming off a dominant performance over Priscilla Cachoeira, and that was mainly due to her grappling. But let's not forget, Cachoeira is literally bottom of the barrel. She is a literal zero in terms of her defensive grappling. I think this narrative that Miranda Maverick is this just super physical wrestler grappler is just total fool's gold, to be honest with you. Like, if you look at her fights, where she's having big grappling success came against really poor defensive grapplers, like that Cachoeira fight. Shanna Young is another one. Sabina Mazo. Those were the fights where Miranda Maverick was able to get off on her grappling. When she's unable to do that, she looks very limited. And you saw that in the Jasmine Jasudavicius fight, somebody that's not super technical, but was able to fend off those takedowns and get the better of the grappling exchanges to the point where Maverick's coaches are literally screaming at her not to grapple. And if that's the case, and you're just limited to her striking ability, her striking's not great either. She's low output on the feet, she fights with her hands down, and she likes to reset basically after every striking exchange. And what you saw in that Jasmine fight is somebody that's willing to stay on the forward pressure, not let her reset. You're gonna be able to land clean multiple times. She doesn't deal well with pressure. I think a lot of people are just running with the fact that she's just instantly going to get takedowns here against Lee and instantly top timer as the better grappler, and I strongly disagree. Andrea Lee, I think the market is lower on than they should be because she's faced much stiffer competition than Miranda Maverick. She's faced Natalia Silva, who we just saw put up an impressive win last weekend. Silva, I've said it before, I literally think she competes for a title in the very near future. So I'm not going to knock Lee for not knowing what to do with a fighter like Silva, who's clearly faster than her, clearly better than her, able to stay on the outside. And then you look at the Arajo fight, a fight that Andrea Lee nearly finished in that first round, emptied the tank and gassed out, and Arajo was able to take over with the grappling and the power. What Miranda Maverick doesn't have, she doesn't have the power of Viviane Arajo, and she doesn't have the speed of Natalia Silva. And we know that historically, she just doesn't really cover these big price tags unless you expect her to grapple. And when they get in close, I think Lee actually has some wrestling and grappling upside. Lee's always been very strong with those body lock takedowns. You get in close, she's got strong judo. She's more than willing to hip toss somebody like Miranda Maverick, who's not that physical of a fighter, who struggles in the clinch against fighters like Jasmine Jasudavicius, who's a very similar style to Andrea Lee. This is a fight that I just disagree with the market. I think Lee's clearly the better striker. Her jab, her front kick should be landing repeatedly against Maverick, and I think people are sleeping on her own wrestling ability, just expecting her to spend this fight on her back. I think she could even come out with just as much top time as Miranda Maverick in this spot. So I like Andrea Lee. I like the underdog. I'm picking her outright to win. I think it goes to decision at a high clip, but give me Andrea KGB Lee to get her hand raised. Starting things off with an underdog. We're going Lee by decision. That's the official pick. Next up in the welterweight division, we have Oban Elliott, a minus 290 favorite. The comeback on Val Woodburn is plus 235. And this is a fight that I expect to score well on DraftKings because on one hand, we have Oban Elliott, who's making his UFC debut off the Contender Series. He fought my guy, Kayak Brito, and I had a bet on Brito there. He didn't end up coming through. I thought Brito would be able to punish the defensive sloppy tendencies that Elliott has. I thought he'd be able to fight off the takedowns and make him pay and knock him out. Now, he did end up hurting Elliott multiple times. The fight was fought at a super high pace, but Elliott, credit to him, he fought through the adversity, fought like a dog with a bone, and ended up getting the contract here. Now, I also just don't think Elliott's that good. That's part of the reason I try to fade him on Contender Series. That really hasn't changed. I mean, clearly the guy has heart, and you do love to see that, but now he's being priced as a big favorite here. I don't have much faith in him. He's a former Cage Warriors guy, primarily a wrestler, but his wrestling is not that good. He typically doesn't really control guys for that long. He struggles to hold them down, so a lot of times they're working back to his feet. And I already mentioned the striking defense being a concern. Now, on the flip side, we have Val Woodburn, who basically is only in the UFC because they needed to keep Bo Nickel on that card and nobody wanted to fight him. And they're like, hey, here's a guy who's 5-0, who's fought nobody, and he's big and strong. We'll throw him on the card. And we saw what happened there. Bo Nickel absolutely starched him. But now he's getting another chance here. He's dropping down a weight class to 170 pounds. Now he is a shorter fighter, but he's super thick and super powerful. So what he has is big power. So a guy like Elliott, who struggles defensively at times, I could see him getting clipped here by a guy as powerful as Woodburn. So while I expect most of the field to just write off Val Woodburn here, and I totally get why, I'm okay with getting a little bit of exposure on DraftKings just because he is one of those cheaper underdogs that at least you can paint the case that he does have the type of upside that would break the slate here. Now, I'm not expecting him to win. I'm just saying I'm not going to completely ignore him in that lower price range, and I expect the field to do so. But overall, I think it's clear that Elliott is the more skilled fighter. I think his skill set should translate well here against somebody like Woodburn, who we have questions with his defensive grappling. And I think ultimately that's going to end up being the difference here. So we're going to go Elliott by submission. That's the official pick. Next fight up, we have Danny Barlow, a -198 favorite with the comeback on Josh Quinlan at +164. And this is another Contender Series fighter. He fought this past season and knocked out my guy Raheem Forrest, which was basically just an all-out war for about 45 seconds or however long it lasted. They went toe-to-toe, and Barlow certainly got the better of it. He was able to hurt Forrest multiple times. He's got big power. He's got a big left hand. He's very long for the division, and he's actually really good with his kicks as well. Powerful head kicks. He stays active with those kicks as well. And I just think he's a pretty solid prospect in terms of his striking ability. I still have some concerns if the fight gets extended because we've only ever seen him extended, I think, twice, and one was his first ever career fight, which I never saw. I wasn't able to find that when I taped him on Contender Series. But then the other one, I think it's a Cage Fury fight. That one you can find. It is out there, and he doesn't look great when the fight gets extended. So that is a concern still for me. He's young, he's developing. It could have improved, but it's still in the back of my mind to a degree. And then the defensive grappling is really just a question mark because we haven't seen hardly anybody try to test him in that realm. I thought Forrest might be able to on that Contender Series fight. Obviously, it didn't play out that way. Maybe a guy like Josh Quinlan, who is an okay wrestler, maybe he can get in close and force some grappling here. But I'd be kind of surprised because Quinlan really struggled with the range of Trey Waters in that last fight. That was a big letdown spot for him there. He was a sizable favorite. He really just had no clue how to get inside his boxing range. He really struggled with the jab of Waters. Anytime he closed the distance, he got countered. He didn't like it. He actually got buzzed a couple times in the third round as well. So he got hurt multiple times there. He didn't get any volume going. Just really had no clue how to deal with the length of Trey Waters. And I expect that to be similar here against Barlow, who actually is longer than Trey Waters. Barlow's going to have a 7-inch reach advantage, and he fights out of the southpaw stance. So a lot of those leg kicks that Quinlan throws isn't necessarily going to be there. I just think Quinlan's going to be kind of clueless on how to close the distance here. And when he was overextending a lot against Waters, if he does that here, he's going to face some really big power from that left hand to God of Danny Barlow. So I'm going to go Barlow by TKO. That's the official pick. Next fight up in the light heavyweight division, we have Jiang Minyang, a -130 favorite with Brenson Robero on the comeback at +110. And we'll start on the Robero side. This is another Contender Series prospect from this past season. He actually came through as a big underdog in his fight with a big knockout victory, and that's what he's capable of doing. This guy is a finisher through and through. He's a kill or be killed style of fighter, and yes, he obviously looks very intimidating there. He's got big power. He's also got some decent submission grappling for his size as well. But what he doesn't have, in my opinion, is durability. And a big reason why I had concerns with him in that Contender Series fight was because of that durability. We have seen him multiple times get rocked, get knocked out. This guy does not react well to being hit on the feet. And then on the flip side, Minyang, I actually think should be a bigger favorite here. And maybe that's a hot take, but I just trust Minyang's durability a lot more. He's been finished on the regional scene as well, but we haven't seen him in about 2 years. He fought on Road to UFC back in 2022, and he was a super big underdog that ended up coming through. But I thought he looked pretty good there in terms of his striking ability and his durability. He ate some good shots, completely unfazed as well. Now, he ended up suffering an injury that held him out all of last year. He seems like he's in a good spot now, though. He's been training. He looks pretty good physically. And honestly, I just think he's a better striker than Robero here, and I trust the durability more. And that's why I lean with him here. But ultimately, combined, I think these guys have only reached the third round like 4 times across like their nearly 40 career fights. So this one is probably going to end in round 1. I think you want to target both sides on DraftKings. I'm going to be leaning more on the Minyang side. We're going to go Minyang by TKO. That's the official pick. Next fight up, we have the biggest betting favorite on the card, Rinya Nakamura, a minus 1350 favorite with Carlos Vera on the comeback at plus 800. And this one's pretty straightforward, so we don't have to spend a ton of time on it. Nakamura was basically one of the most exciting prospects to come off the road to UFC, and he's looked every bit the exciting prospect that we expected through 2 UFC fights. He's coming off a dominant performance over Fernie Garcia, where he basically controlled him for the entire 15 minutes. He comes from a very high-level wrestling background, but on the feet, he's got power as well. Now, he does get sloppy, and he swings wild, but if he's able to connect, he's going to take your head off. And then on the flip side, Carlos Vera, this is a guy who, another guy, like I talked about with Woodburn, I'm not really sure what he's doing in the UFC. He's a 36-year-old regional grinder. He fought on The Ultimate Fighter and lost to Brad Katona, and I just really don't see a win condition for him here. Like, maybe he catches Nakamura shooting at sloppy takedown and catches him in a submission. Like, I don't know how likely that is. Maybe like 3% or something. Like, I just really don't see how this guy wins this weekend. And I just think Nakamura kind of runs through him however he wants. But the bigger question is, do you want to spend all the way up on DraftKings? Because the biggest betting favorite on the card, he's 9,600, so he's the most expensive fighter. So that's going to be a key decision point this week, especially with the 8K range so loaded, is do you have the salary to get all the way up to Nakamura? And that's a topic that we'll talk through more on the Thursday night DraftKings deep dive show on fightnumbers.com. But I just really think Nakamura rolls here. I think he gets it done outside of some weird fluke injury or something like that. So we're going Nakamura by TKO. That's the official pick. Which brings us to our next fight in the heavyweight division, as Marcos Rogerio de Lima comes in as a small favorite at minus 142. The comeback on Justin Tafa is plus 120. And this is another one where I'm expecting it to end early, and I'm expecting the winner to score well on DraftKings. So for that reason, I think it's another fight that you probably want to target both sides across multiple lineups. I slightly favor the De Lima side just because I think he has more ways to win. I think he's more proven in terms of UFC experience, because Tafa, while he's been able to knock out a few guys in the first round, they were really lower, bottom of the barrel type guys. And that doesn't mean he can't knock out De Lima. Look, we just saw De Lima come off a first round knockout loss, so that could certainly happen again. But I also think De Lima has some early knockout upside. He's got some devastating leg kicks. He swings that overhand with some vicious power when he connects. And he's also got the ground game to fall back on. And we just haven't really seen Tafa on his back in the UFC level. I suspect he's not very good based on his brother's skill set. But I just think, again, De Lima just has more ways to win. Either guy can win by knockout early, but I also think De Lima at least has another path to victory with the ground game as well. So we're going to go De Lima by TKO. That's the official pick. And next fight up, we have our featured bout on the prelims, as Amanda Lemos comes in as a small favorite at minus 130. The comeback on Mackenzie Dern is plus 110. And this is yet another fight where I think you can target either side on DraftKings. I expect the winner to score well. On one hand, we have Amanda Lemos, who's a very powerful striker, probably the hardest hitter in the division. Now, she's coming off a title shot loss against Weili Jiang, where she was absolutely beat from pillar to post in that fight. Weili Jiang just completely dominated her. But I also think Weili Jiang dominates basically everybody that she fights, and I think she would dominate Mackenzie Dern too. So I don't think we could really knock Lemos too much for losing that fight, even though she got beat super badly. But I also think she does have clear holes in her game. For starters, the cardio has never been good. Anytime she's been extended outside of the first like 7.5 minutes, she has not looked good, and she's not a high output fighter to begin with. So she really has to have those big moments or finishes. Otherwise, she tends to fade, and you don't want to be holding a ticket if it's going to the judges' scorecards and Lemos has been tired for the second half of the fight, not throwing volume, not looking good. So that she definitely has some concerns. We've also seen the defensive grappling kind of be an issue at times. Like, she's kind of opportunistic offensively with her submissions, but we saw defensively she could definitely get submitted pretty quickly. We saw that with Jessica Andrade. We've seen Weili Zhang just completely dominate her in the grappling as well, and that's obviously going to be the path to victory for Mackenzie Dern. Dern's always going to have that submission grappling, one of the best grapplers in the division. Now, what Dern doesn't have, and she's never had, is the ability to consistently take her opponents down. Her takedown accuracy is still 14% in the UFC. She basically just has no idea how to get people to the ground. Now, it does seem like she's at least trying new ways to do that. We saw in the Jessica Andrade fight, her last time out, she tried like this slick little hip toss as Andrade closed the pocket, and it did briefly get Andrade down, and Dern may only need one grappling exchange here. But I just have concerns that if she doesn't consistently get Lemos to the ground, or if she doesn't do it early, then this might start to look like that Andrade fight where Lemos is landing some really powerful shots and Dern just has no answer for that big power if she's unable to wrap up a leg, force some type of grappling exchange. So it's one where I wouldn't be shocked at either side winning early, but I just can't back Dern here, coming off the knockout loss against a very similar fighter who hits really hard. Lemos just has to keep this on the feet, and she probably gets her hand raised here. We're going Lemos by TKO. That's the official pick. And before we get to the main card, guys, do me a favor if you're still watching, hit the like button and hit that subscribe button. It takes 2 seconds to show your support for this free video, and it goes a long way in helping other people discover my channel, and I definitely appreciate it. Now back to the fight. Kicking off the pay-per-view main card, we have Anthony Hernandez, a -205 favorite with Roman Kopylov on the comeback at +170. And this is another one where I love this fight for DraftKings because either way, regardless of who wins, you can expect the winner to score very well. And I side with the fluffy Hernandez side. You guys know me. I'm a sucker for the relentless grappling, heavy wrestling pace guys, and Anthony Hernandez is all of that into one. In his 5 UFC victories, he has averaged over 116 DraftKings points. You better believe outside of the main event, he is going to be the highest owned fighter on the slate, and for good reason, because he just has a non-stop grappling pace, and he's able to rack up those takedowns. He's also a threat to finish his opponents with his slick finishing ability on the mat as well. Now, on the other side, we have Roman Kopylov, who's on a very nice run himself. He's got 3 straight second-round knockout victories. He's primarily a striker, really powerful leg kicks, solid leg kicks, and excellent takedown defense. He defends takedowns at 92% in the UFC, but I also think he hasn't been tested by super great wrestlers and grapplers, especially lately. So it's like the stats seem kind of inflated to me. Yes, I still believe he has good takedown defense, but I'm not sure it's like this historically good takedown defense that the numbers are currently suggesting. And when he has been taken down and put on his back, he hasn't looked all that great because he's mainly a one-dimensional striker. And I think somebody like Hernandez, who's going to be able to chain his wrestling attempts together, I think eventually that pace and pressure, the nonstop takedowns, is going to pay off for him. He takes over late. They start coming easily as the fight goes on, and he ends up getting the finish here. The one thing I'll say about Hernandez is he's been hurt to the body multiple times, and Kopylov has those really powerful leg kicks. That's his path to victory. I think Kopylov probably has to hurt him on the feet, possibly with the body shot, but outside of that happening, I think the grappling of Fluffy takes over, and Fluffy probably ends up getting the submission here. We're going Hernandez by submission. That's the official pick. Next up in the bantamweight division, we have Merab Dvalishvili, a -205 favorite with the comeback on Triple C Henry Cejudo at +170. And this is another one where I could see people kind of getting sucked in to the underdog here. Henry Cejudo, the great Henry Cejudo, as a big underdog here. You got to play him. You got to play him on DraftKings. I'm not so sure. I think Cejudo, I think it's pretty clear he's not the fighter that he used to be. Certainly not the fighter that he was at 125 pounds. And I think at 37 years old now, it's pretty clear his best days were behind him. The athleticism has certainly declined, and so has the output as well. He's not really putting a ton of volume out there. At least he didn't in the Sterling fight. He did a little bit more in the Dominic Cruz fight, but that's because he was able to end that fight early. I don't know if he would have kept up that pace if the fight got extended. I think Cejudo's still a very high IQ fighter. He's got those devastating leg kicks. He fights a really smart game plan, and if you get in close, he does have power. So that's where Dvalishvili is going to have to be able to stay on his P's and Q's, because we've seen Merab get hurt multiple times. Obviously, the Marlon Moraes fight, there's been multiple times where he's been hurt and able to push through it. Now, outside of hurting him, you're not going to be able to stop that forward pressure. This dude has one of the highest motors in terms of output in the UFC. It is sickening how much activity he is doing from fight to fight. He averages over 6.5 takedowns per 15 minutes, but it's not just the wrestling. It's the jab. It's the nonstop activity on the feet as well. Like, this dude is always doing something, always moving forward. So that's what I keep going back to. It's like, Merab's going to be winning minutes unless Cejudo's able to hurt him. So that's why I side with Merab here. I think I only picked against him once in his career, and I think that was the Petr Yan fight. I'd have to go back and fact check myself on that, but I'm not picking against him here. I think his round winning ability is second to none, and I think the way to beat this guy is to be able to knock him out here, and I'm just not sure Cejudo's going to be able to do that at this stage in his career. We're going Dvalishvili by decision. That's the official pick. Next fight up in the welterweight division, we have Ian Gary, a minus 218 favorite, with the comeback on Geoff Hands of Steel Neal is plus 180. This one was actually booked last year, and Neal pulled out of the fight due to undisclosed health reasons. There was, some smack talk going back and forth. So there is no love lost between these two. I'm excited for them to get inside the cage and work out their issues. But it's also one that I really don't have a ton of interest for on DraftKings. Like, I guess either guy can win by knockout early, but I kind of favor this fight to go a little bit longer here. Ian Gary, he's not exactly a ferocious finisher. He doesn't really chase the finish, even when he's capable of doing it. And Neal, I think, while he's certainly got the power to test the chin of Gary, I don't know if he has the skills here. I think Gary, as much as I have concerns about him once he starts facing the elite level of this tier, I'm not sure that Neal's there, and there's not really anything else that I can point to definitively to be like, this is why Ian Gary wins. But I honestly I think he wins. And that's good enough for me. I'm not super interested in terms of DraftKings here, because outside of that early knockout, like I said, which I don't think happens very often, I just don't really think that he scores well. So this is one where I'm planning to be underweight to the field on DraftKings and just hope the fight hits the judges' scorecards. Gary wins a decision and doesn't score well, and that's going to be what I'm going with. We're going Gary by decision. That's the official pick. Which brings us to our co-main event in the middleweight division, as Robert Whitaker is a minus 225 favorite with the comeback on Paulo Costa at plus 185. And fingers crossed that these two even make it into the octagon, because Paulo Costa is a pullout merchant. So hopefully there's no shenanigans here on fight week, and we keep this 12-fight card intact come Saturday, because this is a nice matchup between two elite fighters in the middleweight division. Obviously, the Whitaker, he's coming off the knockout to Dricus du Plessis, the current middleweight champion. And we know he's been knocked out multiple times in the past as well. So that's something that is in the back of my mind here when you're facing somebody as powerful as Paulo Costa, who's won most of his fights by knockout and is certainly capable of landing something big here that tests the chin of Robert Whitaker. But I also have concerns with the Costa side. For starters, he wasn't able to get Luke Rockhold out of there the last time we saw him, and now he's coming off a sizable layoff. So I'm just not sure that he's the same fighter that he was years ago when he was melting all these dudes. Yes, he's capable of doing that, but is he capable of doing that now in 2024 against an elite fighter like Robert Whitaker, who we know is one of the better defensive strikers in the division? He should be able to stay on the outside, pump that jab, dive in and out of the pocket, and go to mixing in the wrestling. That's something his camp is really focused on over his last few fights. He's attempted 34 takedowns over his last 6 fights, and that was after not really wrestling much at all previous to that. So it's definitely something that they've kind of added to his game at this stage in his career. And that's something that I think could be an advantage for him over Paulo Costa, taken down a couple times, take that wind out of his sails, because the times when we did see him on bottom, he didn't look all that great to me. And if the cardio is a concern anyway, I think that could be a nice game plan for Robert Whitaker, and one that he could stay relatively safe when he implements it. So I'm going to side with Whitaker. Obviously, I'm going to have exposure to Costa as well. He's got that big power, that knockout upside, but the official pick is going to be Robert Whitaker. Which brings us to the main event this week. We have Alexander Volkanovski, a small favorite at -135, with Ilia Toria, a +114 underdog on the comeback. And this is an awesome matchup because on one hand, we have who some people regarded as the pound-for-pound GOAT in the UFC, but now they're kind of cooling their temperament because he's coming off that knockout loss to Islam Makhachev, which, by the way, he took on 11 days notice and ended up getting knocked out in the first round there. But prior to that, people were like, oh, Volkanovski's the GOAT, man. He went up a division and almost beat Makhachev, almost became the double champ when nobody thought he could. He's unbeatable at 145, blah, blah, blah. And now he gets knocked out one time, and people are like, oh, dude, he's washed. He's got mental issues that he's talking about. He's drinking in camp, like all of these concerns. He's getting old now too. Like, I'm not so sure that Volkanovski still is not one of the best fighters on the UFC roster. Now, I do think Toria has the potential to become one of the better fighters on the roster and in the division, but I don't know if he's quite at that level yet. And this is certainly going to be a prove it spot to me, because I'm going to side with the guy that I trust more, the experience level, the skill set. Volkanovski, I talked about the round winning ability of Miranda Dvalishvili. Volkanovski is another one. He is just very, very good at winning rounds. Take out the Makhachev fight. Makhachev is 155 pounds and the best grappler in the division. Ignore that fight for the most part. Just look at 145. There is almost nobody that can compete with this guy in the division. Toria at least has the power to maybe test the chin of Volkanovski if you think it's compromised now at this stage in his career. But outside of that, I think if this fight gets extended, and I kind of think it does, it's got to favor Volkanovski. We've seen him do it time and time again over 25 minutes. He's able to keep up that pace and that pressure for 25 minutes. The leg kicks, I think, are going to be a factor here. He always works those in against most of his opponents, and we really haven't seen Toria deal with them that great. And I also think, even though he was able to put that beat down against Josh Emmett over 25 minutes, I also just don't think we're now automatically assuming his cardio is going to hold up at an elite level against an elite fighter who's going to be throwing nonstop volume for 25 minutes here. So there's just still some questions I have on the Toria side, despite me thinking that he is a potential future champ in this division. I just don't think it's right now. And we even saw that to a degree with Joe Pyfer and Jack Hermanson, where it's like, yeah, you got the young guy, you got the power, you got the swag, but once that fight starts getting extended, boy, it doesn't look so pretty after that. And that's what I could see happening here, is like Toria looking really strong early, maybe even hurts Volkanovski early, but over 25 minutes, I think we see the experience, the pressure, the output of Volkanovski, who's also able to mix in takedowns as well. If Toria starts to get tired, I think he could just start adding those as a way to really cement these rounds. So I'm going to side with the champ here, and still we're going Volkanovski by decision. That's the official pick. And as always, guys, fightnumbers.com will have my ownership projections, DraftKings player rankings, tons of other stuff there, prize picks, underdog fantasy. Be sure to go check it out. You have $200,000 to first place up for grabs on DraftKings. If I don't win it, I hope one of you guys do. Best of luck, and we'll see you guys next time.